In the dense forests of Washington state, a chilling mystery lay buried for nearly a decade, until one man followed a trail of whispers, hidden maps, and a sister's final breath to uncover the truth. She was just a journalist, they said. She wandered too far. But Elena Morales wasn't just a journalist. She was a fighter. 8 years after her disappearance, her brother Adrian stumbles upon a cache hidden deep in the woods, one that would unravel a human trafficking ring, expose powerful lawmen, and ignite a nationwide reckoning. This is not a crime story. It's not even a rescue story. It's a story about one voice refusing to be silenced and the fire it lit in others. What began as the phone rang at exactly 5:47 a.m., shattering the silence of Adrian Morales' Seattle apartment like a gunshot. Outside, the city was still wrapped in gray mist, buildings ghost-like in the half-light, the sky bleeding from black to steel. Adrian lay motionless on his couch, surrounded by the debris of another sleepless night. Half-drunk coffee, open folders, old photographs scattered like forgotten prayers. He hadn't dreamed in months, not really. The kind of peace that welcomed dreams had long been stripped from him, carved away slowly since the day his sister disappeared. When the call came, his body reacted before his mind did. His hand reached across the table, knocking over an ashtray and a bottle of ibuprofen as he snatched the phone. The screen flashed a name he hadn't seen in years. Maxine Delano, an old colleague from their days in the field, now with a human rights monitoring group working along the U.S.-Canada border. "Adrian, I need you to listen carefully." Her voice came through, low and strained, the kind of voice you used when something sacred had just been dug out of the dirt. They found her truck, Elena's F-150. For a second, he thought he'd misheard her. Elena's truck, missing for 8 years, was a phantom, a relic of a closed case no one cared about anymore. "Where?" he whispered. "Near an abandoned mining shaft east of Bellingham. A field crew stumbled on it yesterday while surveying landslide damage. It's buried in a collapsed cave system. The plates match, the VIN too. Same white Ford she drove the week she vanished." Adrian sat upright, every muscle in his body stiff with electricity. His heart wasn't racing. It was thudding, slow and deep, like something old awakening. Did they find her? The pause on the other end told him more than he wanted to hear. Not yet, but the scene's complicated. Forensics are on their way, but you need to get there before it's swallowed by jurisdiction. 8 years, he murmured. And just like that, something turns up. "Not just something," Maxine said grimly. "There are bones, Adrian, 3 sets, but only one ID confirmed so far. Sarah Liu." Adrian closed his eyes. Sarah, the young journalist who'd vanished with Elena during their investigation into cross-border labor trafficking. Sarah, who had a 3-year-old daughter waiting for her that week. "Jesus," he muttered. "And Elena? No sign yet, but it gets stranger. The truck, it's too clean. Minimal rust, barely any water damage, even though that shaft's flooded most years. Forensics think it's only been down there 6 months, maybe less. Someone moved it recently." Adrian stood now, his back aching, his mind spinning. He'd chased the truth for 8 years, chased it until friends stopped answering calls and editors stopped returning pitches. He'd been called obsessive, delusional, but he had always known something was wrong. Elena didn't vanish into thin air. Someone made her disappear. And now, the past had cracked open, spitting out evidence like a corpse clawing out of a grave. He dressed fast, black jeans, work boots, his old utility jacket, the one with ink stains from his war correspondence days. He grabbed his recorder, field notebook, and the manila envelope labeled M Case Unsolved from the filing cabinet no one but him believed in anymore. As he locked the apartment behind him, the sunrise was breaking over the Puget Sound, but he didn't notice. The road north felt too familiar. He'd driven it dozens of times in the first year after she vanished, chasing every rumor and unverified sighting, scribbling notes on roadside diners, border patrol shifts, and strange gaps in reporting. Elena and Sarah had been investigating allegations that a mining company was using old tunnel networks along the border to traffic undocumented migrants and synthetic opioids. It was dangerous work, but Elena was fearless and methodical. She had protocols. She checked in. She never just vanished. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He remembered her laugh, her relentless optimism, her uncanny ability to make people talk. He remembered the day she showed off her new truck, joking that she finally had a vehicle that could handle mud, mountains, and murder if needed. That memory now felt like a knife to the ribs. By the time he reached the site, an unmarked gravel road snaking into thick evergreens, it was cordoned off by bright orange cones and a few scattered vehicles. A Washington State forensics van idled near a canvas tent. No one stopped him when he flashed his old press credentials. He didn't look like a tourist. He looked like a man with ghosts in his eyes. A female investigator with sharp eyes and a worn clipboard nodded as he approached. "You're Morales?" she asked. "They said you'd come." Adrian nodded, unable to speak. The woman gestured toward the ravine, where floodlights now illuminated the collapsed entrance to the shaft. A tow crew was preparing to extract the truck, white, mud-caked, its roof caved in, but unmistakably Elena's. "We've confirmed Sarah Lou's ID," the woman said. "Blunt force trauma, not a fall." Adrian swallowed hard. "And the others?" "Unknown for now. Not your sister. We're still searching the outer tunnels, but the strangest thing, there's evidence the truck was dumped here recently. The vegetation is all disturbed, tire marks from something heavy. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide this late. Question is why?" Adrian didn't answer. He knew why. Someone had buried the truth and hoped time would finish the job. But time hadn't, and neither had he, as a loss became a revolution. And what they tried to bury came back burning brighter than ever. Welcome to the story of Elena Morales, the sister who wouldn't stay silent. Adrian stood at the mouth of the cave, staring down into the gloom as if he could force the darkness to confess its secrets. The buzz of equipment, murmurs of technicians, and the metallic creak of the pulley rig being set up to extract the truck filled the air with tension. But to Adrian it was all background noise to the roar in his head. A forensics agent clipped into a harness gave the signal, and moments later the winch groaned to life, lifting Elena's white F1 150 from the muddy pit like a ghost being exhumed. Water spilled off its frame in long, grimy streaks, and the sight of the truck, still bearing the faded bumper sticker Elena had joked about, "Ask me about journalistic integrity," punched the breath from his lungs. His fingers twitched with the impulse to reach for his camera, but he didn't. This wasn't about publication. This was about blood. "We found something else," said the woman from earlier, Dr. Marin Lydell, senior forensics coordinator from the state lab. She led him to a temporary canopy erected beside the site. Under it, 3 body bags rested on cold metal tables, the rain from the night before still clinging to their rubber exteriors. "Field identification confirms the middle one as Sarah Lou," she said, unzipping the bag halfway. Adrian recoiled at the sight of the familiar lanyard still clipped to Sarah's jacket, her press pass, bent and worn, tucked near her ribs like a forgotten relic. Her skull bore a deep indentation. "That wasn't a fall," Dr. Lydell confirmed. "Blunt force trauma, likely inflicted by a heavy instrument, possibly a rifle butt or crowbar. She died instantly." Adrian's chest felt hollow. "And the others?" 2 adult females, unidentified. Their remains are badly decomposed. No IDs, no dental records matched in national databases yet. We're running DNA and checking immigration alerts, but I need you to hear this next part carefully." Adrian turned to her, muscles locked tight. "Elena's not among them," Lydell said. "We found no trace of her body in the truck or cave system so far." That one sentence unraveled everything. For a moment he just stood there, blinking at the rain dripping from the canvas above them. Relief, dread, hope, and horror collapsed into one another like dominoes. If Elena wasn't dead here, then where the hell was she? And why were these bodies staged with her truck? "Is there any chance she got out?" he asked. "Escaped the scene?" "Possibly," Lydell replied. "But there's more?" She pulled up a tablet, displaying high-res X-rays and environmental reports. "This area floods seasonally. If that truck had been submerged for 8 years, we'd see advanced corrosion, sedimentation in the undercarriage, severe mildew in the cabin. But we're not. That truck's been here no longer than 6 months, maybe less." Adrian leaned in, studying the images. It wasn't just speculation. The evidence screamed of recent placement. Fresh algae patterns, disturbed moss, chipped rock at the skylight shaft above. "Someone moved it," he murmured, "after hiding it somewhere else for years. And staged it to look like a long-buried accident," Lydell nodded. "Except they didn't count on the cave being discovered by accident, or on Sarah's remains still telling us the truth." Adrian walked a slow circle around the tent, trying to breathe through the pressure in his chest. He remembered Sarah's mother, how she'd stood at Elena's vigil with eyes as hollow as shattered glass. She'd begged for answers, for closure. And now, after 8 long years, the only answer was murder. "We're expanding the grid," Lydell added. "Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, even cadaver dogs. If she's in these tunnels, we'll find her. But if she was moved elsewhere—" Her voice trailed off. Adrian didn't need her to finish. He already knew. Someone powerful, someone with access and timing, had orchestrated this. This wasn't just an unsolved disappearance. It was an active cover-up. And the person who killed Sarah buried 2 other nameless victims and moved the truck. They might still be out there, maybe even watching. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "She didn't die there. Meet me, alone." No signature, no location, just an ominous promise. Adrian's hands trembled slightly. Only 5 people at the scene knew his number. He looked up and scanned the tree line instinctively, but the woods offered only silence, as if daring him to come closer. Lydell approached again, lowering her voice. "Adrian, I shouldn't say this officially, but the way Sarah was killed, this wasn't opportunistic. It was execution. And if someone staged this 6 months ago, that means they knew someone might come looking again. You've stirred something. Be careful." Adrian gave her a tight nod, then turned back toward the truck now resting on solid ground. The windshield was cracked, the front grille bent. But in the passenger side footwell, beneath a layer of silt and leaves, something caught his eye. A torn strip of notebook paper, water-stained and barely legible. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elena's. He reached for a glove and gently pulled it free. "If this is found, tell Adrian I wasn't alone. They took us north. Thompson knows. Don't trust him." A spike of adrenaline lit his veins. Thompson. Wade Thompson. The security head for the mining zone, a man who just happened to appear at the scene this morning, a man who claimed to have informants. Elena had written his name and warned him not to trust. The cave had spoken, but it wasn't finished. Not yet. Elena had fought to leave a trace, and Adrian, for the first time in 8 years, had something to fight back with. The knock came precisely at 6:03 p.m., 3 firm raps against the hollow motel door that echoed like gunfire in the narrow hallway. Adrian froze, his breath caught in the dry air of the Cascade Ridge Motel, a place so forgettable it seemed designed for secrets. The room smelled of bleach and threadbare curtains, the kind of place no one remembered and no one questioned. He had barely finished taping Elena's torn note into his field journal when the noise hit. Through the peephole, a tall man stood in a tan sheriff's uniform, campaign hat tucked under one arm, silver badge gleaming dully in the yellow light. Wade Thompson. Adrian opened the door cautiously, positioning his body to block the bed where his sister's files and the truck photographs lay splayed like an altar. "Agent Morales?" the sheriff asked, offering a hand with a grip both firm and damp. "Technically journalist," Adrian replied, "and I prefer Adrian." Thompson nodded with the smile of a man used to making allies fast and keeping enemies guessing. He stepped into the room uninvited, his pale blue eyes sweeping the space with the precision of a tactician. "Sorry for the surprise visit. I have information. Sensitive." "You were at the site today," Adrian said flatly. "You didn't mention that earlier." "Didn't think it appropriate at the time. Wasn't sure who I could trust," Thompson answered, removing his hat and wiping his brow. "But after seeing your reaction out there, I knew you weren't just some media ambulance chaser. You want answers about your sister." "What do you know about Elena?" Adrian asked, jaw tight. Thompson paused just long enough to let the question feel dangerous. "I have a contact, a confidential informant, claims to know what happened to her, but there's a catch. He won't speak to law enforcement, only to a family member, someone personal." "And he told you this today?" "Said he got spooked after the cave discovery hit the news. You digging around kicked up dust, old secrets." Thompson's voice was even, too even, as if rehearsed. "He wants to meet, but on his terms. Remote, private, no surveillance." Adrian narrowed his eyes. "How do I know this isn't a setup?" "You don't," Thompson admitted, folding his arms. "But if there's a chance your sister's alive, or if there's something left to find, you can't ignore this." "Where?" Adrian asked. Thompson hesitated, then slipped a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Old Bracken Ridge Mill, off Forest Road 47. Informant insists on no electronics, no backup." Adrian's pulse quickened. Bracken Ridge. Elena had mentioned that location once in an email, right before she vanished. Just a vague phrase, "Too quiet out there. Feels wrong. Ridge smells like bleach and smoke." He remembered the line because she had never been afraid of anything. Until then. Thompson was watching him carefully. "You recognize it?" "It came up," Adrian replied, "years ago." "Then maybe that's why your sister ended up in that cave," Thompson said softly. "Maybe she saw something. Or someone saw her." Adrian said nothing. Inside, something writhed. Intuition, memory, suspicion. Every journalist's instinct he'd honed across war zones screamed, "This man knows too much." "What else did your informant say?" he asked. "Only that Elena didn't die the way everyone thinks, that she lasted longer than her friend, and that people were involved. Dangerous people." Adrian's voice came out low and cold. "Names?" "Didn't give any. Said he'd explain in person. Tonight." Thompson picked up his hat, his eyes locking with Adrian's. "You got a shot at closure. Don't waste it." As the sheriff turned to leave, he added casually, "Oh, and I heard the truck was in good shape for 8 years underground. Pretty surprising, right?" He didn't wait for a response. The door clicked softly shut behind him, and Adrian just stood there, fists clenched at his sides, every nerve on fire. That final comment, that specific detail. Thompson had recited it without ever hearing the forensic team's report. Only a handful of people knew how well preserved the truck had been. Adrian stared at the door, his mind racing. How could Thompson know that? Unless he was never supposed to mention it. Unless he'd been there before. With trembling hands, Adrian opened his laptop and accessed the original case files, the ones he'd fought to get unsealed through legal channels. Thompson had submitted the first report of the search area the morning after Elena vanished. A detailed topographic analysis recommending against exploring certain zones due to seasonal flooding, unstable terrain, and lack of road access. Those exact zones now surrounded the cave where Elena's truck had just been found. Areas that had never been searched properly. Adrian cross-referenced satellite imagery from that year. The terrain hadn't flooded. The roads weren't blocked. And the area was anything but unstable. The implications were sickening. He redirected the search. He buried the truth. Adrian leaned back, heart thudding. Elena had warned him in her note. Thompson knows. Not guesses, not suspects, knows. And now, Thompson wanted to lead him into the woods, alone. No signal, no witnesses, no backup. Adrian looked down at the paper in his hands. The coordinates scribbled by a man who smiled too easily and asked too few questions about the dead. "Bracken Ridge Mill," he muttered. "Yeah, that's where you want to finish this." But what Thompson didn't know was that Adrian had been preparing for this moment for 8 years. He didn't just want the truth. He wanted proof. And if Elena had left behind more than a note, if she'd buried something, Adrian would find it. Before Wade Thompson buried him too. Adrian didn't sleep. He couldn't. Not with the weight of Elena's name burning like fire beneath his skin. Not after reading her note a dozen times and realizing that Bracken Ridge wasn't just a location. It was a message. Something she wanted him to find. So he sat at the edge of the motel bed as the hours drained away, cross-referencing every report, satellite image, and half-finished article Elena had left behind in her encrypted archive. Years ago, she'd uploaded a private cloud folder titled Iron Vein, with files so scattered and mislabeled, no outsider would have made sense of them. But Adrian wasn't an outsider. He knew her voice, her rhythm. He could read between her silences. That's when he found it. Buried inside an old image set labeled July Wildflowers was a scanned map, hand-drawn, annotated in blue ink, and overlaid with faded satellite grid lines. It showed the outskirts of Bracken Ridge, but not the mill. Instead, it centered on a section of forest marked "No signal, avoid daylight" markers here. There were numbers circled in red, grid coordinates, along with a phrase scratched in block capitals. If they find this first, they win. His pulse kicked. She'd buried something. A cache, maybe. Documents, evidence, or names. Maybe even a voice recorder. And it was still out there, unless Thompson had already found and moved it, the same way he had her truck. But Elena wouldn't have made it easy. She never trusted the obvious path. And if she had been running from someone, she would have hidden it in a place only someone like him would think to look. He printed the map, circled the key points in red again, and stuffed it into a folder alongside her note. Then he loaded his backpack with essentials: flashlight, knife, drone, trail camera, water, power bank, and a second phone. Burner line, no apps, GPS disabled. The weight of it was nothing compared to the heaviness in his chest. At 4:12 a.m. Before the sky even considered turning gray, Adrian left the Cascade Ridge Motel and headed north. The roads narrowed as the town disappeared behind him, replaced by towering Douglas firs and winding switchbacks that felt more like scars on the landscape than roads. The deeper he drove into the wilderness, the more the air felt pressed in by silence. Not peaceful, but expectant. Watching. When he reached the turnoff near Forest Road 47, he slowed, scanning the brush for signs of recent tire tracks. There they were. Deep impressions in the gravel, still sharp at the edges. Thompson had been here recently, maybe hours ago. The road to Brackenridge Mill was choked with fallen branches and overgrowth, but Adrian followed it anyway, parking half a mile out and covering the rest on foot. The forest floor was wet, soft with years of moss and decay. Everything smelled of pine and secrets. When he reached the ridge itself, the first rays of light were just beginning to knife through the canopy. The old lumber mill loomed in the distance, skeletal, rust-covered, silent. But Adrian didn't approach it. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out Elena's map and moved west, toward a slope marked with a red X. It took 30 minutes of bushwhacking before he saw it. A tree with 3 parallel notches carved into its bark, almost invisible under a layer of moss. A trail marker. Hers. 10 more minutes and he found the second. A pile of small stones stacked in an unnatural shape beside a creek bed. His breath caught. She'd made a trail. Even while captured, even while being hunted, she had found time and strength to leave a path. And he had followed it. It felt like touching the edge of her presence, like she was just ahead, ducking behind the next ridge, whispering, "Hurry, Adrian. It won't stay hidden forever." He crested a low hill, following the map's coordinates with exact precision. And then he saw it. A shallow mound near a fallen log. The earth looked disturbed, slightly sunken, with new growth barely beginning to spread. He dropped to his knees, heart in his throat, and began to dig with his hands. Inch by inch, the soil came away. His fingers struck something solid. Plastic. A waterproof container, maybe used for camping gear. He pulled it free, wiped away the dirt, and popped the seal. Inside, a sealed envelope, 2 SD cards wrapped in foil, a stained cloth with a familiar blood pattern. He knew it from the crime scene photos of Sarah Lou. And a folded page written in Elena's distinct handwriting. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it out, but I made sure they wouldn't win. The sheriff is involved. He's not alone. The mill isn't the real site. Go north, follow the riverbed, find Warehouse 3. Adrian sat frozen, wind pushing gently through the trees, as if the forest itself had exhaled. Elena had left breadcrumbs. She hadn't just tried to escape. She'd gathered evidence, hidden it, and planned for someone to finish what she started. And now he knew. Thompson hadn't just misled a search. He had rerouted law enforcement, buried evidence, and possibly helped to kill his sister. But now Adrian had proof. He had her map, her voice, and the trail to Warehouse 3, a place no one had searched. Not yet. As he repacked the evidence, he heard the soft, unmistakable crunch of tires over gravel in the distance. Not where he had parked, not where anyone should be. He slipped behind the log, every sense electrified. Through a gap in the trees, he saw it. Thompson's patrol truck, slowly weaving down the access trail. His window was down, his face focused, jaw clenched. Adrian ducked, breath held. He's looking for the cash, he thought. He knows it's close. Maybe he never found it. Maybe he's afraid I will. Thompson parked and stepped out, scanning the tree line with the wary calm of someone used to being watched. Adrian stayed perfectly still, clutching the container against his chest like a heartbeat. Thompson lingered only a minute before turning back, disappearing into the trees in the opposite direction, toward the mill. Adrian waited until the sound of the engine faded completely, then rose from the brush. His sister had led him here, and now the path pointed forward, toward a warehouse in the woods, toward the last lie waiting to be uncovered, toward a final confrontation with the man who'd buried her. And the truth. Adrian drove back to Cascade Ridge, with one eye on the road and the other on the rearview mirror. every bump in the forest trail rattling not just the undercarriage of his old Honda, but his nerves. The waterproof container sat strapped in the passenger seat like a live charge, Elena's final message, evidence of something far darker than even he had imagined. Her handwriting echoed in his mind. He's not alone. Go north. Warehouse 3. It wasn't just about Thompson anymore. It was about a network, a system, a place where people vanished and paperwork made it look like they never existed in the first place. When he pulled into town, the motel parking lot was half empty, bathed in the pale yellow haze of afternoon. He parked under the lone dead tree near the vending machines, grabbing the container and checking it again. Still sealed, still dry, still his only link to whatever had consumed Elena. Inside his room, he laid it open carefully on the table. The 2 SD cards, the stained cloth, the note, and a flash drive taped beneath the lid, hidden beneath layers of black duct tape. Adrian powered up his spare laptop, one that had never been connected to Wi-Fi, and inserted the flash drive. A folder popped up. Ironvein_archive_final. Inside, hundreds of photos, shipping manifests, stamped invoices from fake companies, surveillance shots taken at night, trucks moving through unlit roads, armed guards, cages, and then 2 photos that made Adrian's stomach drop. Thompson, laughing beside a man with a neck tattoo Adrian recognized from a federal warrant database. Victor Klov, suspected human trafficker, never convicted. In the second photo, Thompson held a clipboard beside an open container filled with girls, young, terrified, wearing blindfolds. The timestamp? 3 months after Elena disappeared. Adrian snapped upright. 3 months. She was still alive then. She hadn't died in the woods. Not right away. Thompson had kept her, used her, questioned her, and when she wouldn't break, he disposed of her like all the others. No body, no trace. Until now. Adrian's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. He couldn't go to local law enforcement. Not here. Not with Thompson still in uniform, still shaking hands at county fairs and signing off on search warrants. He needed someone outside the chain. Someone he could trust. Agent David Chen. A field contact from an earlier expose on private prisons. Federal, clean, and most importantly, angry when innocents were hurt. Adrian texted a burner message. Chen, it's Morales. I need federal backup. Major trafficking op, sending location. Evidence too big to ignore. Then he attached a single image, Thompson beside the shipping container, and dropped the pin on his map app, marking the northern trail where Warehouse 3 would be. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't have time, because Thompson was already playing his next hand. At 5:07 p.m., Adrian's motel door shook under another set of knocks, measured, firm, and unmistakably official. He checked the peephole, Thompson, again. But this time, the sheriff's smile was thinner, more strained, as if something beneath it had cracked. Mr. Morales, he said when Adrian opened the door, keeping the chain on, we need to talk, urgently. About what? The informant. Let me guess, Adrian replied. He got cold feet? He's dead, Thompson said flatly. Hit and run outside town. Just confirmed 20 minutes ago. Adrian said nothing. The lie was too neat, too fast. I'm sorry, Thompson added. He was our best lead. Was he? Adrian asked, eyes narrowing. Or was he just a story you made up to get me into the woods? Thompson blinked once, and for a heartbeat the mask slipped. Careful with those accusations, son. Don't call me that. The hallway felt like it was shrinking. You were at Bracken Ridge this morning, weren't you? Adrian asked. Following me, looking for what I found before you did. You've been breathing mountain air too long, Thompson muttered, but his voice was lower now, coiled. We can still work together. Whatever you think you found, I can help you understand it. You don't want me to understand it, Adrian said, shutting the door slowly in his face. You want to make sure I never tell anyone else. The sheriff didn't knock again. He didn't need to. He'd played his warning. But as Adrian watched him walk away through the cracked curtain, he saw something that made his gut clench. A second figure sitting in the front seat of the sheriff's cruiser, unfamiliar, heavy-set, watching him. Not law enforcement, not press. Someone who didn't belong in Cascade Ridge. That night, Adrian didn't sleep. He packed. He printed every photo, every document, and sealed it in a FedEx envelope marked for Agent Chen's field office. He stashed it at a local print shop with a delay-scheduled pickup. If anything happened to him, it would ship itself. The rest, he loaded into a waterproof satchel and locked it to his belt. At 4:40 a.m., before first light, Adrian pulled onto the service trail heading north. Forest Road 49, the one Elena had marked with red ink, the one Thompson had never allowed search teams near. It twisted and narrowed, then opened into a path carved by tires, recent, deep. Someone had been here, maybe last night. Warehouse 3 was real, and it was waiting. Adrian rolled down the window. The air was colder here, denser. No birdsong, no wind. Just the sound of tires over damp gravel, and somewhere ahead, a truth waiting to burn everything down. The trap was set, but Adrian was no longer the prey. He was the spark dot. The forest gave way like a curtain being pulled back, revealing the sprawling, rust-stained skeleton of Warehouse 3, an industrial grave embedded deep in the hills where no roads led naturally and no eyes were meant to find it. Adrian eased the Honda to a stop beneath a veil of pine branches, heart thrumming low and steady, the way it used to before crossing into war zones or slipping into rebel territories with only a notebook and a press badge. But this was different. This was personal. This was blood. He killed the engine, let the silence settle, then stepped out. The dawn had not yet cracked the horizon, but the air buzzed with a sickening energy, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. The warehouse loomed ahead. No lights, no movement, but signs of life were everywhere. Fresh tire tracks, cigarette butts, a plastic water bottle still sweating condensation. He crouched low and pulled out the small drone from his pack, launched it silently above the roofline. On his phone screen, the camera swept across a flat corrugated surface dotted with new vent fans and reinforced glass. Wrong for a building this old. Too updated, too clean. On the northern side, a rusted door stood ajar, guarded by a man with a rifle slung across his chest. Unmarked uniform, no badge, no insignia. Just watchful eyes and a trigger finger resting too comfortably. Adrian pulled back the drone and tucked it into his coat. He couldn't wait for backup. If there were people inside, alive, every minute mattered. He moved low through the underbrush, circling behind the building where the tree line narrowed to a blind spot in the camera coverage. There, behind a rusted shipping container, he found it. A basement hatch, half hidden by leaves and brush, held shut by a bolt chain, fresh, oily, recently replaced. He cut it with the bolt cutters he'd carried since Bracken Ridge, the snap of metal loud in the dead air. He slipped inside. Darkness swallowed him whole. The stairs beneath the hatch creaked under his weight, wooden and soaked with years of humidity. He clicked on his penlight, sweeping it along the corridor. Exposed pipes, mold-lined walls, and then cells, actual cages. Welded partitions separating the space into narrow pens, each holding 2 or 3 people, mostly women, mostly young, some barely teenagers. They shrank from the light, shielding their faces with trembling hands, their eyes wide and hollow. He choked back bile. This wasn't just trafficking. This was storage. "Hey," he whispered, crouching near the first cage. "I'm not one of them. I'm here to help." A girl with tangled hair and blood on her lip whispered in Spanish. "Are you real?" "Yes," he answered, voice cracking. "I'm going to get you out." Footsteps echoed above, heavy, fast, urgent. They'd heard the chain snap. They knew. Adrian ducked behind a wall just as the basement door burst open. 2 men entered, rifles at the ready. One muttered in Russian, the other scanned the shadows. "Check the cages," one barked. "Someone's down here." Adrian moved like breath, silent, precise. As one guard passed, he rose and struck with the butt of his flashlight, catching the man just beneath the jaw. The body collapsed in a heap. The second turned, too slow. Adrian slammed into him, fighting for the rifle. The man fired once, a deafening crack that shattered the silence and seared Adrian's ear. But then Adrian drove his knee into the man's gut, grabbed the weapon, and struck him across the head. Silence returned, and then sobbing. The girls. They were crying again, not from fear now, but from something like disbelief. Adrian dropped to his knees, grabbing the guard's keys. "I need you to stay calm," he said, unlocking the first cage. "There's a team coming. We're going to get you all out." But they couldn't wait. There would be more guards, more weapons, more cruelty. He moved fast, unlocking every cage, ushering the victims toward the rear wall where a busted vent opened into a crawlspace he'd seen on the drone. "Go, one by one. Follow the tunnel to the tree line. Stay low. When you see a highway, flag down the first car. Don't stop for anyone in uniform. Understand? Nods. Tears. They began to move. 10, 15, 22, and then a voice from the final cell, older, hoarse, defiant. "You're Elena's brother, aren't you?" Adrian froze, turned. In the shadows, a woman leaned against the bars, emaciated, bruised, but unbroken. "You knew her?" he whispered. "We all did," the woman said. "She gave us hope. She tried to get us out." Adrian unlocked the cage, helping her stand. Her eyes burned. "She's the reason most of us are still alive." A sound above, an engine roaring, doors slamming, voices shouting. They knew. "Go," Adrian said. "Now!" He shoved the last of them into the tunnel and turned back toward the stairs, rifle in hand, heart hammering like a war drum. And then, the wall behind him erupted. A flashbang, a scream, and the unmistakable growl of a man he'd come to hate. Wade Thompson's voice boomed through the smoke. "You had to keep digging, didn't you, Morales? Could have walked away, could have left her buried. Now you're going down with the rest of them." Adrian raised the rifle and said through clenched teeth, "You buried the wrong sister, Sheriff." The smoke curled in thick ribbons through the broken concrete corridor as Adrian dropped behind a collapsed beam, clutching the stolen rifle like a lifeline while Thompson's men advanced through the haze with military precision, flashlights slicing through the darkness like knives, their shouts cold and clinical. "Clear that side! Watch the corners! He's still down here!" Somewhere above, vehicle engines roared to life, panic moving fast now, the operation unraveling as the reality of a failed cover-up closed in around them. But here, in the depths of Warehouse 3, it was still a war zone. Adrian's pulse thudded against his teeth. The girls, most of them, had escaped through the tunnel, but he didn't know how far they'd gotten. And he knew exactly what would happen if Thompson's men caught them before they reached the highway. Collateral. Loose ends. He had to slow the pursuit, or stop it. A guard appeared around the corner, barely 5 feet away, gun raised. Adrian fired first, a tight burst from the rifle's shoulder that kicked like a mule, but dropped the man instantly. Shouts erupted behind him. "He's armed! Downstairs! Southeast stairwell!" The walls lit up with muzzle flashes. Concrete exploded, sparks rained. Adrian sprinted, weaving through the narrow hallways as rounds whined past him, chipped metal stinging his neck. He dove into an adjacent boiler room, heart hammering, lungs burning with chemical rot and adrenaline. Then, like thunder breaking through glass, another sound hit him. Engines. Big ones. Multiple. Moving fast. And not from Thompson's crew. From the opposite direction. From the hills. His burner phone buzzed once in his chest pocket. A text flashed. 2 mins, hold position, Chen. Adrian grinned through grit and blood. They were coming. But 2 minutes was a lifetime when you were outnumbered. He grabbed a pipe from the wall and jammed it through the door handles behind him, buying himself seconds. Footsteps pounded the hall. Radios crackled. Thompson's voice growled through the din. "Do not let him out of that building. Kill him and burn the rest. No survivors." Adrian checked the rifle. Half a mag left. No grenades, no vest. Just instinct and the kind of resolve born only from love and rage. He stepped up to the side door and kicked it open, sunlight blinding him as he broke into the main warehouse, and froze. The full horror was laid bare. 50 or more victims, men, women, even children, huddled in chain-link pens, some crying, some silent, most staring in disbelief as the chaos unfolded. Crates of narcotics sat nearby. Heroin, fentanyl, amphetamines, packaged with industrial precision. This was no basement operation. It was an empire built on flesh and poison. And Thompson had been running it for years. Adrian didn't hesitate. "Federal agent inbound. Everyone get down. Help is coming." The captives barely moved, paralyzed by trauma. One girl, maybe 11, stood up, trembling. "Are you with Elena?" she asked. Adrian swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yes, I'm her brother." She nodded once. "Then I trust you." Behind him, the warehouse doors blew inward. DEA, federal agents, hands in the air. The tactical team stormed in, black-clad, precise, rifles trained. Gunfire erupted immediately as Thompson's crew fought back, desperate, chaotic, cornered. Adrian dropped behind a crate and watched as the battle unfolded in slow motion. A guard raised his pistol toward a group of cowering victims. Adrian fired, dropping him mid-stride. Another burst from the tactical team shattered the catwalk above. One trafficker fell like a rag doll. Flashbangs exploded. The air filled with dust and screams. A man in plain clothes sprinted to Adrian's side. Agent David Chen. "Jesus, you look like hell. You should see the other guy." Adrian coughed. "There's more downstairs. I sent the girls through the tunnel. We've got teams covering the exits, but Thompson's not here." Adrian's face darkened. "He's here. He wants this place erased." Just then, gunfire erupted from the west stairwell. Agents shouted, "He's running!" Chen grabbed Adrian's shoulder. "You good?" "I'm going after him." "You're bleeding." "So is he." Adrian ran. The stairwell twisted up like a spine, littered with spent shell casings and blood streaks. At the top, the service exit gaped open, wind howling through the broken frame. Beyond it, deep in the woods, a patrol vehicle peeled away in a spray of gravel. Adrian fired once at the tires, missed, but the sound was enough. The vehicle swerved, clipped a tree, and came to a shuddering stop. Adrian charged. Thompson crawled from the wreck, leg bleeding, shotgun in hand. "Don't," Adrian warned, leveling the rifle. Thompson sneered, blood in his teeth. "You think this ends with me? You think she mattered?" "She mattered more than you ever will," Adrian said coldly. "She died protecting people you called product. She was a problem, like you." "No," Adrian whispered. "She was the storm." And he fired. The blast threw Thompson back against the vehicle, weapon clattering from his hands. Sirens screamed through the trees as agents arrived, cuffing him, dragging him to the ground. Adrian stood in the morning light, rifle shaking in his hands, the cold wind finally clearing the smoke from his lungs. Warehouse 3 was secure. The victims were safe. The nightmare was ending. But Elena, she was gone. Her blood had soaked into this earth long ago, and yet, in the eyes of the people he helped save, Adrian saw her again, fierce, defiant, and unbroken. The chaos had subsided, but the silence it left behind felt even heavier. The warehouse was now crawling with agents, medics, and evidence technicians. Bodies were being tagged. Survivors were being wrapped in silver thermal blankets, guided gently by trauma response teams, whispered to in every language from Russian to Spanish to Vietnamese. But Adrian moved through it all like a man chasing a shadow, untouched by the noise, blind to the commotion, focused only on the final thing he hadn't yet found. Elena had led him here, to the truth, to the faces she had died trying to protect, to the men who thought they could silence her. But this wasn't the end. It couldn't be, because she had written it herself. Go north. Follow the riverbed. Find Warehouse 3. She had drawn that map with dying hands, had buried the evidence of her torture and resistance with a precision only someone thinking of others could have accomplished, which meant she had hidden one more piece, something Thompson never found, something still waiting. Chen found him outside the warehouse beside a blood-stained trailer marked with a false logistics logo. "We've confirmed 37 survivors so far," he said. 3 fatalities during the raid, 5 traffickers in custody, 1 dead. "Thompson? Alive, in hospital transport. They're prepping charges. We have enough to bury him." "Not yet," Adrian muttered. "There's more." Chen looked at him carefully. "Adrian, you're bleeding. You need medical. Later." "Where are you going?" "Back into the woods," Adrian said, already pulling the blood-soaked sleeve tighter around his arm. "Elena didn't just leave me photos and names. She left me a destination." He didn't wait for approval. He just turned and walked into the trees. The trail north of Warehouse 3 was barely visible, a line of broken brush and old animal tracks snaking along a dried-up riverbed that glimmered faintly in the dawn light. Adrian followed it with quiet desperation, one foot in front of the other, the ache in his ribs pulsing in rhythm with every heartbeat. His mind replayed everything. The cache behind the log, the girl in the cage who said Elena had tried to help them, the fact that Thompson had returned to the woods not to bury a body, but to dig something up. Something Elena had hidden. And that something, Adrian was sure, was still out here. After nearly an hour of weaving through bramble and fog-draped pines, he reached it. A clearing no wider than a truck, where the earth had been disturbed in a rectangular patch near a half-rotted stump. Fresh dirt. Recent. Thompson had tried to find it. He'd started digging, but hadn't finished. The shovel marks were shallow. The ground hadn't been pierced deep enough. Adrian dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with bare hands, gritting his teeth as pain lit his muscles. Inch by inch, the earth gave way. After what felt like hours, his fingers struck something solid. Metal. A lockbox. Military grade. He yanked it loose, wiping away soil with trembling fingers, breath catching in his throat. The lock had been broken already, probably by Thompson, but inside, everything remained. Sealed under a plastic liner were dozens of items: a small audio recorder wrapped in gauze, a blood-stained scrap of shirt with a note scrawled on the inside hem, and a thin folder labeled Operation Hollow Vein, Witness Account, E. Morales. His heart stopped. He opened the folder with reverence. Inside were hand-drawn maps of the trafficking routes, full names of buyers, license plate numbers of delivery vehicles, personal photos of Thompson with traffickers and victims, and pages upon pages of notes written in Elena's tight, clear handwriting. They separated us after Sarah was killed. I was moved to a second facility. I pretended to cooperate, gave them fake intel, delayed the extractions. I saw girls being loaded into trucks like boxes. Some never came back. They forced me to transcribe fake reports. I memorized everything I could. If I die, let someone know I fought. Let someone know we were real. Adrian clenched the pages in his fists, fighting the tremor that rose through his chest. She had known. She had known that she wouldn't make it out alive. But she hadn't stopped. She had written every name, every face, every route they used. She had turned her captivity into an investigation, into a final story. One they would never silence. He took the recorder next, clicking the play button. Her voice came through. Scratchy, faint, but unmistakably Elena. If you're hearing this, it means they didn't erase me. Thank you for not giving up. I'm not afraid anymore. I only regret not having more time. I saw too much. I know too much. And I hope it's enough. Tell Adrian I'm proud of him. Tell him he has to finish what I started. And Adrian dropped to his knees in the dirt, tears blurring the edges of the clearing, the sound of her voice both balm and blade. He didn't move for a long time, not until Chen's voice came through the radio, clipped to his belt. Adrian, we've got helicopters coming in. The survivors are secure, but we've found more evidence. Looks like your sister was right about a second sight. Adrian stood slowly, holding the recorder in one hand, the folder in the other. She's right about everything, he whispered. Always was. He turned back toward the trail, toward the warehouse, toward the flames of justice that were finally beginning to burn. And behind him, in that quiet hollow where the truth had waited 8 long years beneath the trees, the morning light fell gently on the place where a sister had buried her final scream, so that others might one day live to speak again. Adrian stood before the podium in the packed press room of the Department of Justice, the overhead lights searing hot against his bruised skin, the scent of antiseptic still clinging to the bandages wrapped around his ribs. Cameras clicked in a staccato rhythm like distant thunder. Reporters filled every seat and spilled into the aisles, their notebooks open, their eyes sharp. But no one said a word. Not yet. For once, the media knew this wasn't just another story. This was a reckoning. He took a deep breath, the kind that felt like sandpaper in his lungs, and glanced down at the simple manila folder in front of him. It held the last words of Elena Morales, the names she died for, the maps, the photos, the documents that had cracked open a decade-long conspiracy and sent shockwaves through federal agencies, border patrol offices, and every law enforcement department between Seattle and Vancouver. And now, it was his job to say it aloud, to make sure no one could pretend they didn't know anymore. 8 years ago, Adrian began, his voice steady despite the tremor running beneath it. My sister, investigative journalist Elena Morales, disappeared along with her colleague Sarah Liu while working on a story about cross-border trafficking through decommissioned mining routes. For 8 years, her case was dismissed, buried under insufficient evidence and jurisdictional excuses. We were told she probably crossed into Canada, that she got too close to the wrong people, that she was gone, and that was the end of it. A murmur ran through the room. Adrian paused, lifted his gaze, and let the silence stretch like tension wire. But that wasn't the end, he said. That was the beginning of something much worse. He opened the folder slowly, revealing a photo, grainy but undeniable, of Sheriff Wade Thompson standing beside an open container of caged women, laughing. This man, Adrian continued, was entrusted to lead the original search. He submitted the first missing persons report. He was the face of compassion, the voice at the vigils, the one who told us to hope. And all along, he was the architect of the very operation Elena had been investigating. He redirected search efforts, buried key witness statements, destroyed evidence, and when Elena got too close, when she documented his routes, his partners, his buyers, he took her. The silence shattered. Flashbulbs exploded. Questions rose but were swiftly silenced by DOJ moderators. Adrian raised another photo. This time, a handwritten map, lines drawn in frantic strokes, marked with Warehouse 3, Route 49, and the phrase, "If they find this first, they win." "She didn't stop," he said, his voice cracking just enough to make the front row of reporters lean in. Even when imprisoned, even after witnessing murder, she faked cooperation. She passed false intel to buy time. And with what strength she had left, she recorded names, faces, shipping manifests, and movement patterns. She buried them in the woods with the hope that someone would find them. And when I did, everything unraveled. He reached into the folder again and pulled out the small audio recorder, holding it up for everyone to see. This, he said softly, was her voice, her testimony, her goodbye, and her last act of defiance. Elena Morales wasn't just a victim. She was the reason 37 people are alive today. She was the reason a multi-million-dollar trafficking network has been dismantled across 3 states and 2 countries. And she is the reason Sheriff Thompson and 6 of his co-conspirators are now facing federal charges, with more to come. A wave of applause rippled from the back, soft, restrained, respectful, but it carried through the room like thunder. Adrian cleared his throat. "In the coming weeks," he said, "the DOJ will release full records from the investigation. But there's one thing I want to make absolutely clear. This did not happen because of an agency. It didn't happen because of jurisdiction. It happened because one woman refused to give up, because she believed that even in the dark, someone would keep looking, that someone would listen." He let the silence return. The weight of her absence pressed against every wall. "So now I'm asking you," he said finally, "listen, not just to me, not just to this case. Listen to the others, to the parents still waiting, to the girls who won't speak, to the people the world forgot. Don't let this be one more scandal that fades behind the next headline." He stepped back from the podium, his hands shaking only slightly, as questions erupted like shrapnel from the floor. Names, dates, demands for details. He didn't answer. He had done his part. The evidence would speak louder than he ever could. Behind the scenes, Chen approached with a grim nod. "Your sister's name is on every screen in the country right now," he said. "Her story's breaking the wire in 6 languages." "Good," Adrian whispered. "It deserves to. You're going to be a target." "So was she," Adrian said, "but she never stopped. I won't either." That night, in a quiet office beneath the DOJ building, Adrian sat alone and listened to her recording again, her voice scratchy, bruised, determined. "If you're hearing this, it means they didn't erase me. And they hadn't. Not this time. Elena was gone. But now, the world knew her name, and the silence she had been buried in had finally, irrevocably, been broken. By the next morning, the entire country was on fire. News stations ran Elena's voice on a loop, her whispered confessions now played between morning commercials and late-night analysis. Cable hosts debated whether she should receive a posthumous medal for bravery. Congressional leaders called for hearings. Activists flooded Capitol Hill with signs that read, "She was buried, not forgotten," and "Elena told the truth." But behind the headlines, the reality was more dangerous, because when you pull the curtain back on an empire of silence, those who built it don't go quietly. Adrian knew this, and so did the men watching him. It began with phone taps, then shadowed SUVs parked 2 blocks from his apartment. A break-in that didn't steal anything, just moved his photos out of order. Psychological warfare, subtle but exacting. And still, he refused to run. Every morning he returned to the DOJ building with a fresh batch of documentation from Elena's files, now digitized and categorized. Every night he slept with a loaded pistol beneath his pillow. He wasn't afraid to die, he was afraid to let her down. In Vancouver, the second facility Elena had mapped, labeled only as Black River, was raided by Canadian authorities. 15 more victims were found inside. Half of them had been marked deceased in falsified hospital records 3 years earlier. One girl, barely 16, asked the rescuers if Adrian was real, or just another lie. Back in D.C., Sheriff Wade Thompson's legal team filed a motion to suppress evidence, citing unlawful search and seizure, emotional duress, and claims that the photos were deep fakes. But the judge, after listening to Elena's audio for less than 2 minutes, denied every motion. Let the world hear her voice, he said. The trial date was set for September. Until then, the witnesses were kept in protective housing. The warehouse grounds were declared a federal crime scene, and Adrian became both a hero and a threat. Invitations poured in. From networks, from podcasts, from authors wanting to option his story, but he turned them all down. This wasn't a story. It was a reckoning. And reckoning didn't need fanfare. It needed justice. On the third night after the press conference, his doorbell rang at 2:11 a.m. He rose from the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, heart thudding low and tight. He checked the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness. And then, just before he turned away, a girl's voice. "Mr. Morales?" He opened the door slowly. Standing in the hallway was a teenage girl, thin, trembling, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her left cheek bore the faded outline of an old bruise. "My name's Cassie," she said. "I was one of them. I didn't speak at the warehouse, but now I want to." Adrian stepped aside, let her in, made tea with shaking hands while she sat at his kitchen table, staring at the wall like it still held memories she couldn't scrub clean. "Elena used to hum," she said after a long pause. "Even when they hurt her, even when they locked her alone, she'd hum old music, jazz, I think. I thought she was crazy at first, but later I realized she was doing it for us. So we knew we weren't alone." Adrian nodded, throat locked. "She told me once," Cassie continued, "that one truth, spoken out loud, can burn down 100 lies. She said it like it was gospel." "It was," Adrian whispered, "to her." Cassie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small necklace, beaded, half melted. "She gave me this the night they took her away for the last time. Told me to keep it safe. Told me I'd know when to give it back." She slid it across the table. "I think it's time." Adrian stared at the beads. They were cheap, faded, but they shimmered like diamonds under the kitchen light. "Thank you," he said. Cassie stood slowly, pulling her hoodie tight around her. "If you need me to testify, I will. I'm not scared anymore." "You might be," he said gently, "and that's okay, but if you speak, really speak, they can't ignore you. Not now." She nodded once, then walked out into the darkness, her shoulders straighter than they had been. Adrian closed the door and leaned against it, breathing in shallow, shaking pulls. This was the price of truth. It wasn't one explosion. It was 1,000 aftershocks. Survivors stepping forward, systems breaking, and every time someone tried to bury Elena again, someone else stood up and said, "No." And somewhere in that storm, Adrian was finally beginning to understand. His sister had already won. The courtroom buzzed with a silence so thick it felt alive. Cameras banned, phones confiscated, the air charged with expectation. At the front, flanked by 2 defense attorneys in sleek gray suits, sat Wade Thompson, the once revered sheriff now shackled at the wrist, his expression unreadable, jaw clenched beneath the fluorescent lights. Across from him, Adrian Morales sat at the prosecution's bench, not as a lawyer, not even as a witness, but as the reason this trial was happening at all. He held nothing but a pen and Elena's necklace, curled in his fist like a lifeline. Judge Mallory Carrington entered with slow, deliberate steps, her gaze sweeping the courtroom like a sword. "This court will now hear testimony in the matter of the United States versus Wade Thompson," she said. "Charges include conspiracy to traffic persons, obstruction of justice, murder in the second degree, and abuse of official capacity." The first witness took the stand, a former Border Patrol agent turned whistleblower. He described falsified logs, erased video footage, orders to look the other way whenever certain trucks crossed unmapped roads near the Cascades. He named names. He didn't flinch. Then came the victims. One by one, women stepped into the courtroom like ghosts made flesh, no longer hidden behind caged walls or nameless files. Some trembled, some spoke with fury. One girl, just 17, pointed straight at Thompson and said, "You called me product. I'm a person. I always was." The room held its breath. The defense tried everything, discrediting memories, twisting timelines, citing trauma-based distortion, but the jury wasn't blind. Not with the evidence. Not with Elena's audio recording echoing in their ears. Not with Adrian's articles having already awakened the conscience of a nation. On the third day, Adrian was called to testify. He rose slowly, every step toward the witness stand heavy with the weight of years lost. "State your name," the prosecutor said. "Adrian Morales." Relation to Elena Morales? Older brother. Do you believe your sister was murdered? Adrian stared at Thompson. I don't believe it, he said quietly. I know it. Do you have evidence? Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out the original recorder, now worn with fingerprints. Her voice, her notes, her maps, her witnesses. All of it is her evidence. The courtroom fell silent. The prosecutor asked, why did she do it? Adrian paused, his eyes distant. Because silence is where evil grows. And she wasn't afraid to scream. Murmurs rippled. The judge struck her gavel. The defense attorney rose sharply. Mr. Morales, are you a licensed investigator? No. A federal agent? No. Then what qualifies you to lead this investigation? Adrian looked at him, fire steady behind his eyes. Because I loved her, he said, and no one else was looking. For a moment, even the defense attorney was quiet. When Adrian stepped down, the girl named Cassie rose to take his place. Her voice trembled at first, but then, halfway through her testimony, it rose. She hummed a jazz in the dark, Cassie said, staring past Thompson. She used to say, they can break my bones, but they can't make me silent. She saved me. So now I'm saving her. Her words dropped like thunder. The gallery, filled with survivors, supporters, and strangers who now knew Elena's name, sat in complete stillness. By the sixth day, the outcome was inevitable. The prosecutor closed with a single photo, Elena's face half-shadowed, half-smiling. She was one of many, he said, but she left behind a map out of hell. All we had to do was follow it. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman rose, a voice clear, guilty on all counts. Thompson didn't speak. He didn't flinch. But Adrian saw something behind his eyes. A crack. Not fear, not remorse, but defeat. As if the one thing he truly feared had happened. The truth had survived him. Outside the courthouse, hundreds waited. Candles, signs, murals. Someone had painted Elena's face across the side of a nearby building with the words, "She never stopped fighting." Adrian stepped into the sunlight, holding her necklace in his hand like a banner, and for the first time since she vanished, he looked up and whispered, "We did it." The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in silence, respectful, unified, powerful, like a song she might have hummed in the dark, now sung by 1,000 voices in the light dot. The memorial was quiet, not silent, but quiet in the way nature speaks softly when something sacred is about to be remembered. Wind moved through the trees in careful murmurs. Sunlight filtered through their branches, casting broken halos onto the rows of chairs assembled on the Capitol lawn. There was no stage, no cameras, no politicians posing for quotes, just people, survivors, families, journalists, and in the front row, Adrian Morales, holding his sister's necklace like it had never left her throat. It had been 1 month since the verdict. 1 month since Thompson had been sentenced to life without parole. 1 month since the whispers stopped, and the world finally started listening. But justice wasn't a destination. It was a bridge, and Elena had built it in silence, brick by brick, through pain and will. The Department of Justice had decided to name the new Human Trafficking Task Force building in her honor, the Morales Center for Survivor Justice. But that wasn't why Adrian had come. What brought him here was the stone, carved by hand, set beneath a tall flame-shaped sculpture of cracked iron and scorched steel. At its base was her name, chiseled into black granite, Elena Morales. She never stopped fighting. Beneath that, smaller letters, "Let one voice rise and others will follow." The ceremony was small, and when Adrian was asked if he'd speak, he didn't prepare a speech. He just stood before the crowd, the wind gently tugging at his jacket, and looked at all the people she had saved, some holding candles, some holding each other, all holding space for someone who was gone but not lost. "My sister didn't die for justice," he began quietly. "She lived for it. She breathed it. She gave her time, her safety, and her hope to chase it down in the darkest corners of the world. And when they silenced her voice, she found another way to speak." He glanced at Cassie, who stood nearby holding the hand of another girl Elena had saved. She gave her truth to others, and they carried it, until we all heard it. He paused. No paper, no microphone, just his voice and the memory of hers. I used to think losing her was the worst thing that could happen, but I've realized now, forgetting her would have been worse, and today I know we never will. He stepped down. Cassie stepped forward. She said nothing. She just lit a match and touched it to the base of the iron sculpture, where a small channel of ceremonial flame began to rise. It flickered, grew, settled into a steady burn. Elena's flame, eternal. That night, Adrian walked alone through the city. Headlines still buzzed in the distance. New arrests made, additional trials, networks unraveling. The war wasn't over, but something had changed. There was light now, where once there had been silence. He found himself outside a local jazz bar, soft music spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, a singer with a velvet voice crooned a tune that felt like a memory. Adrian didn't know the words, but he knew the feeling. It was the kind of song someone might hum in the dark. Not to fill the silence, but to remind others they weren't alone. He smiled, placed the necklace on the table beside him, and whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" No answer came, but the music didn't stop, and the flame in his chest, once fueled by grief, now burned with purpose. Elena wasn't just a victim. She was a witness, a fighter, a voice. And thanks to her, the silence would never be safe again. Elena Morales never made it out of that forest alive, but her voice did. And because of that voice, 37 lives were saved, a nationwide network was dismantled, and the system that failed her was forced to look in the mirror. Her brother Adrian didn't set out to be a hero. He simply refused to stop searching when everyone else gave up. In the end, it wasn't just about justice. It was about memory, truth, and legacy. A flame that refused to die out. A hum in the dark that others began to follow. This isn't the story of a victim. It's the legacy of a fighter, and the fire she left behind in all of us. Wherever someone dares to speak the truth in the face of silence, Elena's voice lives on. This was her story. Now, it's ours.